start in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
I live by the old code of second floor!
Why look for a scientific explanation when you can put blind trust in an invisible Sky Daddy?
Sky Daddy all the way.
Go watch your crappy sitcom! Turn up full volume, why don't you?
Aubrey, weird, I can't even get through my couch!
My counselor was like, "Oh, you're on second floor bridges." And I was like, "What does that mean?" And it apparently was like notorious on campus for like the closest thing. It's the closest thing that a Christian fraternity can have to like, or a Christian college can have to like a fraternity. Is how I describe it.
Gotcha.
Without like the parties and stuff. It just like shenanigans and a really close knit group of guys that just we just had a lot of energy.
Yeah.
And we just enjoyed like going to the cafeteria together and going out to eat and just doing a bunch of fun, creative stuff. And that was like where I really
like
felt
the most random stuff.
like we have this sign back here. That's a terrible idea. What time? I think really encapsulates our philosophy. But in it like a seriously like genuine way, we like all cared about each other a lot and like brothers in Christ and would disagree about a lot of stuff. Like there's guys that were like super liberal and guys that were super conservative in terms of like Christianity. A lot of differing views, and we would always talk about those differing views. And so we always said like, what if we could bottle this? Like, what if we could just give this experience to someone else? Because that was the first time that I really felt like genuinely empowered to not just like be myself, but like be the best version of myself. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so sort of what Zach and I were talking about before we started the podcast, like a few months before, was, okay, we don't have like our conditions are different now. We're not in college. College makes it really easy to connect with people, right?
Sure.
Like you're in a dorm right next to somebody.
Yeah.
And so
literally live on this like two doors down.
From
everyone,
it's so easy, right? But now
sure.
as adults, you have to like make time to connect with people. And sometimes it's hard to do that even in church because it's either like multiple services or, you know, you're serving, they're not, or
in your 20s, everybody's in different walks of life.
Some
people are married with kids, some people aren't, and like it's hard
pursuing
to
a career or business.
Exactly.
It's just sometimes
so many things.
Hard to make time for what came so easily before. And so we were just like, you know what? Because second floor, it was always like we didn't take no for an answer. We always were like pushing the boundaries, and we were like, and I would say even kind of the few years after COVID that you guys moved here, it was kind of like, you know, we were sort of all like reeling a little bit of what do we do with our lives type thing. Yeah. We didn't necessarily have that same type of spirit.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think like we all still maintain our friendships like really well, but we just. Like, I think the most frustrating part for us was that after you leave college, everyone just expects you to like, oh yeah, like that time was just for college. You know, you're never going to have relationships like that or like friendships or community like that ever again. And that's where we're just kind of like, no, like there's got to be a way.
It's such a depressing thought. It's like the end, and then it's like, I'm expected to just cut everybody off and then like move on. Like, what? Yeah, that's tough.
So
it's just not right.
Yeah.
It's not. And we just refuse to accept that limiting belief.
Especially when you do have like deep friendships, and it's not like, I mean, some college friendships are like you're just hanging out because it's college life, you know. But when you have like actual deep friendships, like why would I not keep up with this person? Like why would I not, you know?
Exactly. And so we talked a lot about, I guess, sort of almost like the theory. We were trying to reverse engineer what made us such a successful community on second floor, and we kind of came up with a few different like pillars of that. One of them was like it already had a lore, like a story to the community, which made it like really easy to jump in. And then it was like we had this level of irrationality of we were just willing to do something that people would not think is rational, but it just made us come alive. And we would do practical things like go eat together and hang out and like play video games and do what, you know, teenage boys do. And but the biggest part I would say is that there was a space that we had like a shared space to be able to do that. It's really hard to find that now.
Yeah.
There's not something really like that. And so we kind of were developing this idea of like, what if we like had like a cafe, or like, what's the easiest thing to say, well, why don't you just come meet me here? It's like a coffee shop. That's like the easiest thing to go meet your friend, right? Or whatever, or even like a business partner or whatever. But then like a coffee shop, it's like, okay, well, like what else do you do? You know, it's kind of like it's just a coffee shop.
Yeah.
And so we sort of kind of came up with this idea of what if we did like a co-working, like a space that was intentionally designed for you to want to stay there longer.
Yeah.
And like, I can't tell you how many times I've been in a coffee shop and overheard someone's conversation and been like, dang, I kind of want to meet this person.
Yeah.
Or like, you know, they're talking about the Bible, they're talking about something that I'm interested in too.
Yeah.
But then I feel weird and I have all those like, you know, things come up in my head about not wanting to connect with someone.
Yeah.
And so like, what if we just designed a space that was easier, especially for our generation, to
it's so
connect,
hard. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's super tough. And so basically we had that idea, and then we were like, well, we can't just necessarily start a cafe right now. But what can we do? Well, it's cliche, but we can start a podcast and just see if it's just Zach and I that are feeling this way, then probably not a good business idea. But like, we found over this past year, interviewing literally anyone that we were interested in talking to for longer than 10 minutes, and just being led by the Holy Spirit of who to have on, we found out that I don't think that we're alone in that. I think there's a lot of people who
for sure.
feel the same way.
Yeah.
Like, what do you think?
I agree. I think especially like being some like people who are trying to pursue their faith at this age and in this season of life, it's like the world is, I mean, we're not technically the next generation, but the world is still trying so hard to just distract us from, you know, having purpose and pursuing, you know, things that further the kingdom. And so when you find like-minded people, it's like, wait, but we could do this together, and we'll be even more like powerful together. And it gives you a sense of like you said, community. Even when I moved here, I'm so thankful for the Lord, like the people that the Lord brought around me, but it is so many like older families or, you know, families with young kids, and I love all of them. But that has been like a prayer in my heart of like, Lord, we need more young adults who are just like, right now, when you don't have, you know, 10 kids, it's like, you have a different mission, and your family isn't your first mission yet. And you have more time to, you know, energy to pour into things like this, or you know just
For
pursuing.
Sure.
And so I think when you find other people that are in that same season, it's like, okay, let's like pursue this together, you know.
100%. Let me do the intro real quick, because I really want to dive into your backstory. So welcome everyone back to Psych Full Experience. We have a special guest today, Loren. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for asking.
I just want to commend your bravery real quick, because we met yesterday at Panera Bread. You were reading a great book called This Present Darkness.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh, that's a sick book. I love that book. And we just kind of struck up a conversation and figured out that we have a lot in common, and that you were actually about to share your whole story and your testimony that would be last night at your youth group for your church. And I was like, you know what? Gosh, I want to hear more about Loren's story. Let me just ask her if she's down to come on the podcast. And you were down. So thank you. There's not many people who are down like that. So thank you for trusting us. And so tell us a little bit about like where you're talking a little bit off camera, but for people who who are just like tuning in right now, where did you grow up and what was that like?
So I grew up in Tennessee, and I grew up in a very Christian environment. My parents are Christians, grandparents, great-grandparents, like it was a long line. And I grew up in a really big family. So I have 6 sisters and 2 brothers. So I'm like one of 9 kids. So
where are you in the lineup?
I'm the 3rd. So I have 2 older sisters, 4 younger, and my brothers are younger. Yeah, so busy, crazy life. And we were all homeschooled all the way through. So my mom was very busy, her whole, you know, raising all the kids. But so yeah, it was really, looking back on like my early childhood, I loved my childhood. I mean, it was definitely different than a lot of people, I think, but I look back on it with so much fondness because there's so much like nostalgia and like even just like us mentioning Adventures in Odyssey, like there's so many things that my siblings and I think when you don't grow up in like public school or whatever, you have different things that you bond on, and so all my siblings and I had like our things. And I mean, if it wasn't Little House on the Prairie or Veggie Tales or something, like that was our thing. So so yeah, it was very, in a way, sheltered and different, which gets into like more of like my testimony as I came out of that. But it was really sweet. But I think, like anything, the enemy can use something that was intended for good and can really manipulate it. And I think my parents, their heart definitely was the best for their kids. Like they wanted to do the best for kids, and they love the Lord, and I know that, without a doubt. But I think their attempt in just sheltering and their attempt in just taking care and protecting was kind of used against them as the enemy kind of got in and shook things up a little bit. So my family started going to a church when I was 12, and it was kind of one of those churches that like there were other big families and there were other homeschoolers, so it's kind of like we don't even think about it, we're just going to go because our kids will fit in and we'll be able to make friends and that kind of thing. And so we started attending the church, and I made lifelong friends from that church. I made a lot of friends along the way, but it was a really great season in the beginning. But as I was like growing up in this, I just kind of started, like red flags just started coming up, I think, as I was understanding, because I had said like the sinner's prayer. I had been baptized when I was like 9 early on, and this church was, you could relate it to a Southern Baptist church if you're familiar with the Southern Baptist. It wasn't technically a Southern Baptist, but it was very similar in a lot of ways. So and so there was a lot of pros and there were a lot of cons to it, but I started seeing a lot of hypocrisy in the church, which any church you go to, you're going to find that. It's we're all human, but this church in particular, as a 12-year-old, I'm seeing things that are like, wait a second, this is not what you're presenting at church. Like the version of the parents that I knew when I would, hang out with their kids at their house, or I would spend the night with their families, what I saw behind closed doors was not what they were presenting to my parents at the church. And so at 12, I'm like kind of connecting the dots, and I'm like, wait a second, why are we all pretending to be a certain way? Because it was there was a lot of pressure and like emphasis on legalism and just looking a certain way. Like everybody really cared about appearance. And so it was like, we went through that phase of, okay, girls have to wear skirts to church on Sunday, guys need to be in khakis and button-ups, and like it wasn't my whole childhood, but we definitely went through that phase. And so it was just really important to everybody that you show up on church and you say this and you do this and you don't do this. And so when I knew all these rules and I was, following all these rules, and then I saw other people who claimed the same thing not following the rules, like behind the scenes and behind closed doors, I kind of just started being like, I don't know that I really agree with this, and I'm seeing more hypocrisy. And as I got older, it just kind of escalated and more things started coming out where I was like, I don't think this is what I really want to do anymore,
So was one of those, the Duggars didn't go to your church, right?
No.
Okay.
I only met the Duggars a couple of times. I just relate my childhood to them in a lot of ways.
Which I think is helpful for people that are listening to kind of get an idea, because I think there's a lot of people who saw that show. What was like the official name? Do you know? It was like 19 and counting,
depending on how many kids they
had.
had.
Yeah. And so, but then you were really good friends with a good friend of their family.
We had some mutual friends with their friends. So it wasn't like, I was never tight with the Duggars. I don't want to put that out there that I was like besties with any of them. But I relate to their childhood just because theirs was more extreme. Like they grew up in almost like what I would call a cult, I would say. I don't want to speak for them, but they were heavy in legalism and being very strict. And so there was a lot of things I saw in their, life and what they portrayed, at least on television. I saw a lot of things mimicked in my upbringing as far as just rules that were is this really benefiting anybody? Is this really biblical? Is this like something that the Lord is putting on us to follow? Or are we putting all these extra rules just to make ourselves look a certain way or look better to, you know? So that was really my comparison to the Duggars, is just this like list of rules of we need to look this way.
I'm like really fascinated that you were having this self-awareness at like 12.
It definitely has like grown over the year. I think at 12, I was just realizing that people were lying. I think that was at 12 was probably more my realization of like, you're telling people this, but you're doing that. And that was where I was like, there's like a disconnect. And so why are we acting this way? And
did you feel like it was just you that noticed, or
no,
was it like you and a couple friends, or?
Yeah, I think it was me and my sister are really close in age, and it was a couple of our really close friends that were kind of wrestling with our faith and really starting to ask questions of like, I don't know that I agree with this being handled this way. And it wasn't, we didn't have a biblical basis for it because we weren't really studying the Bible for ourselves. It was more like we go to Sunday school and we go to you know, church and that kind of thing. So it wasn't that we were like, this is not biblical, but it was like, I'm seeing what you're telling me and what you're doing, and that's not the same thing. And I don't appreciate it, you know.
Was it like encouraged for you guys to do personal Bible study, or was it only?
It was definitely encouraged by my mom, for sure. My mom was like really wanted us to, and I know that was her heart. The church, I mean, it wasn't that it was discouraged, and you know, if I had been an adult going to that church at that time, maybe I'd have a different perspective of how they presented it. But at 12, that wasn't the emphasis I got from it. That wasn't something that I saw as like important. It was more just we listen to what we're being taught, and we play the games at youth group, and we, you know, do the thing. So yeah, I don't remember there being like a real emphasis other than like inside my home.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
So how long did you and your family attend that church?
My family attended until 2020. I attended until 2014.
Oh, wow.
2014.
Okay.
Yeah. So I left the church when I was 16. There had been some things that had happened. So basically, one of my best friends at the time had come out as gay. And that was obviously like, I think what I struggle with this church is like nobody wanted to talk about anything. And if you had questions or you were confused, it was kind of like a general answer given. And like, we don't want to, you know, talk about the problem.
Yeah.
And so when all of this was happening, the church, it was more of like, let's just kind of pray it out and like just hope that it goes away rather than like rather than just like kind of work through it like you would any other issue that, you know, you're struggling with. And I think that was probably, there was things leading up to it, but that was like the big thing that I was like, this is my best friend and you're kind of humiliating him in a way, you know. And it really started this like, I think, seed of bitterness of like, I don't really want to do this. And so I started kind of like withdrawing from the church. I think that happened when I was 14. And at that time, like there was such a spirit of like depression over that age group. Because if I was 14, my sister would have been 15. So it was like 13 to 15-year-olds just like really struggling with depression, anxiety. I mean, I didn't know anybody in my group that wasn't, you know, struggling with self-harm or suicide. Like my best friend was in and out of rehab for that. Like it was just a.
Why do you think that was? Just,
you know, I really don't know, other than just the enemy really coming for that generation. And like there was just something about that group that was just, I remember explaining it like my best friends, my sister included, were all wrestling with it, and I was wrestling with it, but I was kind of always the person that people would like come to and like, I need to talk about this, I want to talk to you. And so I always like thought of it as like me holding all these ropes, and like each one of my close friends is attached to this rope, and I'm like just kind of trying to keep everybody like, don't die on me. Like I need to like hold this together. And it, you know, 13, 14, that's a lot of pressure. And so it was just an overwhelming season. And so I think during those years, it just created a lot of like anger and bitterness toward the church, toward God, I took a lot of things out of my mom. My mom and I are so much alike that it becomes a problem.
Yeah.
And I love my mom, and we're really close now, but through those years I really struggled, and she and I really struggled. And so at 16, I basically was like, I don't believe this anymore. Like, this is kind of too crazy for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember having a conversation with my dad, and I was like, I don't want to go back. Like, don't make me go back. And I think they were struggling to know how to handle it, you know, because it's like you love your kids, you want the best for your kids, and if your kid is genuinely like struggling to go to church, you don't want to force them. That wasn't ever my parents' heart of like, I'm going to force you to believe this. And so they kind of were like, okay, like, if you know, we're not going to drag you there every week. You're 16, you know, you're driving on your own now. And so they kind of just encouraged me to find another church, but I was too far gone at that point. I was like, I don't want anything to do. I just had a lot of, just anger toward church people.
So what does like your schooling look like? Did you graduate early? What's your schedule like during the day?
So I was a part of a like Friday co-op through high school. So I would go and take my high school classes and do homework through the week. So I graduated in 2016. So I graduated when I was 18, turning 18, because my birthday's in May. So I was like about to be. So during those years, I was still at home, obviously, like living at home, doing school, going to co-op. But I started working at Chick-fil-A when I was like 15.
Classic.
Yeah. Typical homeschool
That
story.
is the homeschool,
funnel
that you're on
yeah,
right
that's
there.
like the steps you have to take to get through life. So I was working there, and I was actually working quite a bit. I think I was working like 30-ish hours while being in school. I had worked my way up to that. And so, but Chick-fil-A opened up. Everybody thinks I'm going to send my kid to Chick-fil-A and it's going to be like the most wholesome environment. And it's like the best. That is not the
Any
case.
place you work at fast food, you're going to get a public school experience.
For sure. And that was like culture shock for me.
Really?
Because I had been surrounded by homeschoolers my whole life.
What's like the first moment you remember being shocked?
I think I was really shocked by the conversation first and foremost. Like, I didn't grow up around people that cuss. I didn't grow up around people if I heard in my entire 26 years of life, I've heard my mother say one cuss word. That was not something that ever came out of my parents' mouths or anything. And so being surrounded by people who were so open and just like saying this, saying that, I was like, oh gosh, like, I didn't even know, like, this was
bunch of heathens around here.
Like, yeah, repent for that.
Bunch of heathens serving God's chicken.
Yeah, it was definitely a culture shock going into that. Yeah.
And so you're doing this while you're in college.
Well, I'm technically still in high school at this point.
Gotcha.
I worked at Chick-fil-A for like 7 years.
What?
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Yeah, through high school and college. And so
that was not intentional.
Their mascot's a cow. Dude. That was great. That was top tier.
Yeah. I was working at one Chick-fil-A I was 16 to 19, and then I moved to a different Chick-fil-A because I started going to college. It's on a different end of town, so I moved to a different Chick-fil-A through college. But,
okay.
Yeah.
How old were you when you first started working at Chick-fil-A?
15.
You were 15.
Maybe technically 14.
Really?
But I think I may have been hired at 14, but I didn't actually start working until I was 15.
Okay.
And so then you graduated like normally like at 18.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you worked there for 3 years during high school,
mm-hmm.
and you probably could work a good amount because you were
I'm
homeschooled.
Yeah. There were there were laws. Before I was 16, I couldn't work more than like 20 hours a week, I think. And then after I turned 16, it kind of freed up a little bit, and I was able to work like 30 or something like that.
So did you like? How did you get a car? Did you save up for it? Did your parents help you?
Saved up, paid cash. I was like that. Yeah.
Heck yeah.
Got my first car when I actually bought it from my manager at Chick-fil-A. Yeah. It was a really cheap old, like, I don't even remember what year it was, but it was like $2,000. I was like, that's all I got. It was all my savings.
Does it have 4 wheels? Does it drive?
Yeah. That's all I had.
You remember what kind of car it was?
It was a Chevy Malibu.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Can't go wrong with that.
Yeah. Yeah, it was great. That's great.
Okay, so you worked there for 3 years. What's Loren like when she first starts versus Loren when she graduates high school? Because during that time period is when you had your like, I'm done with church. I'm done with this whole hypocrisy thing.
Yeah. So 16 to 18 were tough, tough years. Starting to work at Chick-fil-A, I got involved with a whole different group of people. Didn't grow up like I did, didn't have the same background. And I got involved. Well, I was introduced to alcohol when I was 15, actually through a homeschool family that kind of told everybody they didn't drink,
No
and so
way.
at least that was my parents' perception of them. I don't know if they were telling everybody that, but I didn't realize it was just that kind of hypocrisy of like, no. But then you're serving alcohol to a 15-year-old. And so it's kind of like, that was my
wild.
first, it was kind of
That's
intense.
really
like,
wild.
This is not, it makes sense to me.
Yeah.
So I was introduced to it really young. And then when I got involved with this friend group, I started drinking pretty heavily when I was like 16. And this was, something I kept hidden, obviously, from my parents. My family didn't know, anything that was going on. So 16 to 18 was honestly, like, not to be dramatic, some of like the worst. Like, I was like, I was drinking. I had started dating a guy that I had met in that time, and that relationship like went so bad, I guess. It became like a really abusive situation. So like during those years, it was kind of just like I was just hanging on for dear life. Like I felt that way. But I mean, it was also like consequence of my own sin. I was choosing that life at the same time,
So were you like going to work and then like going to party with them later, basically, and then like hiding all of that from your, like basically saying that you were working when you were hanging out and partying with them? And...
I would be like home. I would do school, go to work, and I was always night shift, so I always closed. And so those hours, it's like kind of easy to say, we're still working, we're still cleaning, we're still finishing, whatever.
Sure, yeah.
And so then and then sometimes I'd be like, oh, I'm staying with a friend, I'm sleeping over at so-and-so's house, and I think I became a really good liar, and I hate to say that, but like I think my parents too. It wasn't that people didn't know what was like that something was going on, because I was becoming a very different person. It's not like I was keeping up this like Christian, like persona. It was definitely like they saw this like darker, just like angry side, I guess. And I think my parents were really trying to navigate how to be there for me. But I mean, I'm one of 9 kids. I wasn't the only one they could like pay attention to and be there for. And so my sister was struggling just as much, if not worse than I was at that time. So they're also trying to be there for her. And so I think a lot of things, it was easy to get away with a lot because I wasn't their only kid. And, so.
Were you still pretty close with your siblings during that time? Or?
I was really close with my oldest two, the one that's right above me, older than me. She and I were really, really close, and really have been close for most of our lives.
Yeah, okay.
And she and I kind of left the church around the same time.
Gotcha.
And so we kind of bonded over our like going astray.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm assuming that like you probably had crushes and stuff throughout your homeschool with all these other families and stuff, and then probably when you went to Chick-fil-A, you meet like a whole different group of guys. So like, what is that? What drew you to that one guy that you started dating, or what was it that made you just?
Honestly, I never officially dated before this guy.
Right.
And so when I met him, honestly, I remember not liking him in the beginning, but I think when he took interest in me, it was that like 16-year-old girl, like I haven't ever experienced this or like gone down this road. And so it was kind of just like somebody's paying attention to me, and I'm, somebody is caring. And of course, like any relationship in your teens, in the beginning, everything is sunshine and roses and nothing could possibly be wrong. And people definitely like had things to say and was kind of like, hey, you need to like be careful with this guy. Like, he was a little bit older than me, not much. He was like a year older. But he was just grew very differently, very different background, very different worldview.
Yeah. So did your parents know that you were?
No, they did. And what was crazy is my family loved him.
Whoa! What?
Yeah, it was really wild.
Did not see that coming.
They liked they didn't agree with it because they knew that he wasn't a Christian. And so it was like, but I also wasn't claiming to be a Christian then either.
Yeah.
So they were kind of like, we don't want you dating a non-Christian, but we also are more concerned about you. You know what I mean? Like, so it was kind of a weird, but yeah, I mean, we started dating, and he became very involved with my family. Like, he would come to all the holidays. He knew my grandparents, and my family really liked him, especially in the beginning. And because no relationship is terrible from start to finish, so like, it was definitely the first year and a half, he was really involved, and everybody really loved him. And then it was more the second year and a half that I became more pulled away from my family. And partly because of that, because I didn't want to admit that what everybody had been warning me about was right. I didn't want to admit that I had been wrong.
Yeah.
And so I kind of just hid a lot of our relationship from people because
Yeah. No one likes to be wrong.
Yeah.
It sucks.
So during that time, like, how would you describe your relationship with God? Was it like completely like, I'm totally done? Was it something that like you thought about often, or?
It is something I thought about, but it was not something I was telling people I was an atheist. Like, I was to the point where I'm like, if people that like met me after I left the church, obviously if people grew up with me, I'm not like, I'm an atheist now, but if they met me and they didn't know, I'd be like, no, I have nothing to do with church. Like, I know I grew up there, but like, I did not want to be affiliated at all.
Wow.
So it definitely was something in the back of my mind, because I knew, like, early on, I had an understanding. When I first like got saved, I was like 9.
Yeah.
I had an understanding that I could pray and God would hear me. And I understood that there could be communication, but there was always a disconnect for me between communicating and like loving and having a loving relationship. And so I think that disconnect in my mind was, even if I claimed atheism, it really was that I just didn't believe God cared. I didn't believe he was invested in my life. I don't think I ever really doubted his existence. It was more just, you're up there, but you're not doing much, for me. So
do you think that that's because of the way that you were subjected to so much legalism, that you didn't believe that God could love you because you weren't following the rules right?
I think so. And sometimes I feel like guilty thinking about like my mindset back then, because the legalism affected me a lot. And I do think there was a disconnect with that because of it. But I always am like hesitant, because my home was not that way. Church and everybody I knew outside of my home, I mean, I hesitate to say everyone, but a large majority of people I knew were that way. But within my home, my parents were so loving, and my parents were like, preached the love of God. And like, it wasn't there was legalism inside my home, definitely. But I know my parents' heart was to teach us that God loves us,
Yeah.
And so I think that I've even I've gone through like counseling in past years, and that's something my counselors have asked, like, do you have a good relationship with your dad? Like, do you feel like your dad loves you? I'm like, I know my dad loves me. Like, I have a great relationship with my dad and both my parents now. And it's always like like, you almost like expect it to be the opposite, to like make it make sense. But I don't know. There was something in my brain that just did not understand that God loved me, but I can't really fault that to my home or my family,
Yeah.
Interesting.
So then how did you end up in Texas?
Wait, before that,
okay,
we're skipping a part, right? Because we went Chick-fil-A for 3 years, right? But then you went to college.
That's right. Okay.
Yeah.
You went to college in the same town?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So was it like a community college?
Yeah, it was community college. So originally I had planned to go for nursing. So my grandmother's a nurse, my dad's in the medical field. I've always been interested in that. So I originally went for nursing. I started signing, I wouldn't say interpreting. I started learning sign language when I was 9. So I grew up like around deaf people and all of that. So that had always been an interest and always been something that I had pursued. But when I got to school, I really wanted to go medical field, but I wanted to take ASL classes at the same time because I wanted to really like improve. And with the time, I didn't realize how much of a time commitment those classes would be, because they want you involved in like Tennessee School for the Deaf. They want you doing like all the things. And I wanted to, like, I didn't realize, I think, until then how much of a passion I had for it and how much I loved it, that my A&P class was getting in the way of me being able to do these like other events. And so I changed my major and I dropped like my biology classes, and I was like, wow, I'm done with science. I want to like do something that I like really love and care about. And so I pursued, which technically my major was still like science related, but I just did the 2 years. So I only have like my associates, and pursued ASL those 2 years. And then, yeah, graduated, got my degree.
Okay, so you're 20 now,
mm-hmm.
and then you still working at Chick-fil-A, right?
Yeah.
And you work there till you're 22?
22. Wait, 2020. 2020, which I would have been 22, yeah.
Okay, and so what are you doing like those next 2 years?
I was honestly just, so I moved out from my parents' home when I was 18.
Okay.
And I moved in with my sister, and she and I were roommates, had an apartment together on like that end of town. So like I grew up East Knoxville. My school, the second Chick-fil-A I worked at, all of that was West Knoxville. So I moved out there with my sister, and I'm kind of just living. I'm working like full time. I had become a kitchen manager at Chick-fil-A, so I was like making decent money at that point, and was just trying to, I was just honestly like, I loved school so much, like I loved being in school, that when that ended, I kind of went through the season of like, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do in my life? Like I missed all of that, so I was just working. I don't even remember really all that happened in those 2 years. I was, working, and I had moved from that first Chick-fil-A, so I had a different group of friends, and this is just like the Lord working. Like hindsight, I see how he was placing people in my life, because he moved me out of that Chick-fil-A of really just a lot of, I don't know, people just dragging me into different situations, and me willingly going also, but
bad influences.
Yeah. And so the second Chick-fil-A, I was surrounded by a different group of people, and some were believers, some weren't, but it was just a genuine, like, we just want to hang, like, we just want to be friends, like, we just want to get to know each other, and it was a much better environment for me. And during those years, I really started reconnecting with my family more. I think all of, like, my anger and bitterness had kind of started to, like, calm down a little bit. And I started just talking with my family more and having more of a relationship. My mom and I still struggled, and we definitely weren't like in a great place, but we were speaking. There were several years that we like really didn't speak at all. Okay. And so we were kind of starting to like at least make some headway into having conversations and that kind of thing, and just, you know, pouring into like the friends that I had at the time and that kind of thing. Between those.
Okay. So then how did you end up in Texas? And because you were telling me at Panera, you were saying that you found this other church.
Yeah. Well, so I guess leading up to that, so I had done a discipleship program. So technically I really had not chosen to walk with the Lord again until I was 23. So 2021, up until 2021, I was still all that time, like, making better choices, but alcohol was a continual struggle for me. Like that was just my thing that I kept going back to. But like I felt happier, which sounds weird, but like I was just like, I felt like my life was improving in a lot of ways. And so in 2021, the Lord had really been working on my heart and like had been softening me to the idea of pursuing him again. And actually school had kind of played a part too, because I had to do, I think I had told you, I had to do internships with my ASL program. And the easiest way to do an internship was through this church that had a deaf ministry.
Yeah. I was wondering about that.
Yeah. So
that just makes sense.
Yeah. So I was back in church, and it was actually the church my dad grew up in, the deaf ministry that I had been connected to since I was, an infant.
Okay, yeah.
And it was my grandparents' church. They like still go there. And so I got involved with the church again. I was going every week. And even if I wasn't agreeing or really even understanding a lot, it was still seeds being planted, and the Lord was using it. And so I was doing that. And then I guess all of that leading up to 2021, in 2020, my family finally left that church. And that was huge for my family, because I had kind of always had this like bitterness of, why are you still there? Like there had been so many things that had happened in my mind. I'm like, you all just need to leave. Like it's in my opinion, it was a dead church, you know? And so my family finally moved out of that church in 2020 because of COVID and everything. And I had moved in with my grandparents because of COVID. My sister and I moved out of our apartment. I moved in with my grandparents, and my family moved to a chapel in Knoxville. And they started going. And my mom, she called me and she was like, I want you to visit this church with me. She was like, we've gone a couple of times. It's so cool. And they had friends that went to that church, I think. And so she was like, come visit with me. And I was like hesitant because I had always said, I had been kind of saying like, I might start going to church again. I had been kind of going with my sister, a church that she had been going to. And obviously I'd been interpreting with my grandparents' church. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, I want to find a church again, but I want it to be my church. I don't want to go to church with any of my family. I don't want to go to church with anybody that knows me or I grew up with, like anything like that. So I was like, I'll visit, but I'm not going to go there. Like, that's not going to be my church. And so I visited one day, and I just remember being blown away by the young adults in that church, because that was the first time I had met people my age that I could see a genuine love for the Lord in them. And I still did not understand this idea that I could love the Lord. Like, that was still a foreign concept. But talking to these young adults and them just expressing their heart for the Lord and what they're wanting to do for the Lord and that kind of thing, like, it wasn't, I could always look at a Christian and hear what they say and pretty much clock like, this is Max. Like, you're like, you're not, this doesn't mean anything to you. Yeah. And hearing these young adults talk, I'm like, wow, this is like a way of life. Like, you are like in it, and it's like a heart thing. Like, you genuinely want it. And so it really intrigued me, and it made me miss community of like like-minded people and being a part of something that, even the church I came from had its flaws, everybody grew up similarly. And so there was that aspect of community that I hadn't had since I was in that church. Mm-hmm. And so seeing something similar in this of like, we all grew up differently, we all have different lives, but there is an aspect of community because we all think the same on this, and then we all like want the same thing, or at least they did. I didn't yet, but I saw that in them. Yeah. And so I left that church like that day after visiting, and I was like thinking about it. I'm like, man, I really want to be a part of something like this again. But in me fashion, I had a trip planned to go visit somebody like the next month, and I knew, like, we had already talked about what we would be doing, clubs we'd be going to, that kind of thing. I was like, I cannot get right with God and then like ruin my weekend. Like, I have plans. And so I didn't go back to church for like the next month, with the intention of like, I already know the Lord's going to convict me, and I already know like I can't do that. And so I go on this trip. Everything that I anticipated happened. And then I'm flying back to Tennessee, and I'm like literally overcome with like guilt and shame. And I'm like, why am I living for myself? Like, why is everything I live and breathe just what is going to please me in the moment? What's going to make me happy? What's going to make me feel better? And I've always like run to things that let me really numb my mind. And I think that's why alcohol was always such a draw for me, because I never want to have to process emotions or process things that I'm dealing with. And so anything that will let me just turn off my brain, that was what I would go to. And so on the plane coming home, I was just like having to process everything. And it was almost like the Lord was showing me like everything. It was like he revealed his love for me, but at the same time revealed my rejection for him. And it was like this eye-opening moment of like, you have been pursuing me, and I have been stiff-arming you like over and over and over, like not accepting that. And it I don't know what it was that made that light bulb go off, but it was like just a moment where I was just praying, and I'm like, Lord, I really want to change. Like, I really do. And even in my prayer, I was like, I want to surrender everything to you, and I want to be willing to live for you. But I know myself. I was like, I've said that before. Like, I've had moments where I'm like, I'm going to get back into my faith. Like, I'm going to start living for Jesus again. And like nothing would change, and I wouldn't even really put any effort toward it. And so I'm like, Lord, I know that there's nothing in me that can give up alcohol, that can stop partying. And I wasn't even partying, but I can stop messing around, stop being, who I was at the time. And I was like, I know that I can't do that. And I need but I want to. Like, I genuinely, for the first time, I really, really want to. And so I was like, I'm going to try. I was like, I'm giving you everything. I really want to surrender. Help me, like, live that. Like, help me be different. And so I came home. I started going to and I got involved in a young adults group that was just so encouraging and, like, you know, uplifting. And I was very transparent with kind of what I was coming out of. And they were so encouraging and so understanding of where I was. And I was listening to where I was going Sundays, Wednesdays. Like, I was, like, really wanting to get involved in this church and really loving it. And I had a whole new group of friends that I really loved and cared about. And that was when this discipleship program kind of came. They travel the states. And so they came to Knoxville and they presented, like, their deal. I actually wasn't even there that day, but my dad had told me about it. And the discipleship program is basically, you go to New Mexico, you live there for a few months, you take these, like, Bible training classes, like theology, inductive Bible study, Old and New Testament survey, that kind of thing. And then you will travel the states and you basically evangelize. You share this class on how to evangelize, and then you go with churches to evangelize. And then you're doing street evangelism all along the way, every stop. And then the last 3 months are in Uganda, and you're serving like a school out there.
Dang.
Yeah, it was like a big, and at the time, I was applying, I was, like, really ready to get out of Tennessee. I'm like, let me just fresh start, let me find something. Like, I really loved the church I was at, but, like, let me just start fresh somewhere. So I was, like, wanting to move to South Carolina, California, North Carolina. Like, there were so many places I was
Great
sending
choices.
my application out. Yeah. And then out of all of them that I sent out, the only one that not even got accepted, the only one I even heard back from at all was 10th Hour, which is the discipleship program. And so I was like,
so you're sending your applications out to different programs like that?
No, some were schools. I was wanting to go back to school. Some were jobs as an
okay.
interpreter that I was trying to get. Some, it was mostly schools and jobs, and then this program.
Dang.
And I didn't hear back from a single one.
Well, that makes it really easy for which one to choose.
I know,
sure.
It made it real easy. So I signed up, and it was easier too because it was only an 8-month commitment. I could go for 8 months, and if I'm, like, done,
that's not too bad.
I come back home and I figure out what my next step is, and that's pretty much what I did. But I left in January of 2022, and it's young adults from all over the states that will come. And my team was like 10 people, I think, and they're all one other girl was from Tennessee. All the others were from different states, and it's like such a weird group of people who probably would never be friends outside of, like, if you weren't put together.
Yeah.
And I mean, I have lifelong friendships from that group that I talk to some of them every day still. Like, it was the best thing I could have done. And through that process, like, the Lord honestly, like, just had me go through this process of repenting. And I called my parents and basically shared everything that I had kind of hidden from them or lied to them about, you know, when I was a teenager. I mean, things that had happened like 6, 7, 8 years ago.
Yeah.
That I was confessing and repenting for, and the same before the Lord, and all these things. And the Lord was just breaking me.
How did your parents respond to that?
It was so graciously, but it was really hard. I remember I shared my testimony. First time I've ever shared my testimony was a couple weeks into 10th Hour. And I remember thinking, like, as I'm giving, I was kind of giving in detail of, like, this is what happened, this is what I did. And it meant a lot to me, but at the same time, it was all still pretty fresh. I got baptized in August of 2021, and I left in January for this trip. And so I hadn't really been in church or walking with the Lord as an adult for very long. And so I shared my testimony, and I was like, I could not have shared that if anybody from my family had been in the room. Like, they didn't know 80% of it. And so I was talking to the pastor's wife, and I was like, how can I go on this trip and I'm expected to share my testimony or at least talk about my faith when my family doesn't even know, like, what actually happened? And so she was really encouraging me to, like, you need to confess. Like, there's a lot of things I think the Lord's putting on your heart to confess. And so I FaceTimed my mom and dad and had this long conversation. I was like, I gotta tell y'all some things and, like, kind of lay it all out. And they were definitely, like, heartbroken over a lot of things that I had done, had happened to me, had, you know, just different things. But they were like, obviously, like, we love you, and we are so happy with what the Lord's doing and how far he's even brought you in the past, 6 months or whatever. And so it was a great conversation, but it was definitely like lots of tears shed, lots of,
It takes a lot of courage to do that.
Yeah, it does.
It was tough, but my mom, our relationship has like been so radically different since that conversation. Like we've been able to grow so much. I was telling somebody recently that in, I think, the past almost 10 years, my mom and I have been alone together like one time.
Whoa.
Like we were together a lot with my family and we were together a lot.
Yeah.
But I like was never without a buffer with my mom until like 2022 or something like that. And that was just our relationship. And so the fact that now that we are close and she's actually coming in 2 weeks and spending like the week with me, and I'm so excited. And so like the fact that we're able to do that now, like the Lord has just done so much work to
That's
get
incredible.
us.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
To that point, yeah.
Wow.
But sorry, you asked about Texas, and I like.
Okay. That was great.
But with 10th Hour, when we were traveling the States, we came to Texas and we visited Selah Hills, which is the church I go to. And they were in Liberty Hill at the time, and so I visited. I didn't even share. I don't think we normally taught a class. I didn't even teach. I think I was really just on prayer team that night, and I was just kind of in the back room praying with a couple of people. And I met some people from the church. I met the pastor. I met a few different people, and the Lord just really ministered to me during that weekend. Like I really felt like this is home, like this church. There was so much comfort in it, and I was really wrestling with a lot of things like back home that were happening, and so that it was a very memorable weekend for different reasons. And so then we left. They gave each of my teammates a T-shirt that said the church's name, and we took those T-shirts to Uganda. And so while we were in Uganda, I have this T-shirt, and so every time I see it, I'm like, the Lord just has this church on my heart for whatever reason. And so I started praying about potentially coming to Texas when I was still in Africa. And I was like, Lord, I don't even know why. There was no mention of a deaf ministry. There was no mention of anything like that. And I just started praying about this church and about Texas. And I'm like, I have no idea why I'd move here. I graduated the program. I went back home, went back to work. I was working for a medical office. Well, I technically still work for the medical office. And I was just kind of just praying like, okay, Lord, like, where do you want me? Like, I don't really know what to do next. And there was a few different options. I have friends in California that I was like really I wanted to move really bad. And so I was like, Lord, if you want to take me to the beach, that would be great.
Yeah, perfect weather.
Yeah.
I'll allow it.
And so I was just praying, and then there was actually, I genuinely there was something about Texas and this church that I just kept praying about. And then I got a call one day, and I had kind of put out feelers like with the pastor at 10th Hour, like, hey, can you check to see if they need an intern or if they're looking for anybody? And it was kind of like, no, like they're a new church, and so they didn't really have space for that at the time. And so I got a call from a friend who was like, I know this ministry. They have a deaf ministry, a part of it. You need to be a part of it. Here's a phone number for a guy to call. It's in Oregon. Like, go, you should like at least look into this. And I was like, okay. And I literally told him on the phone, I was like, honestly, this sounds so cool. I don't know why, but I think the Lord's moving me to Texas. And he was like, well, follow whatever the Lord, is like telling you to do, obviously. And so, but I got off the phone and I'm like, why would I not pursue? Like, this is a deaf ministry. That's what I've been praying for. I have no idea what's in Texas, I'm not kidding. 5 minutes later, I get a text from the interpreter that is here. And she texted me and she was like, hey, is this Loren? I was like, yeah. She was like, I met you when you came with 10th Hour. I'm like, do you remember me? And I was like, no, I don't remember. I'm so sorry. And she was like, well, we're wanting to start a deaf ministry. Are you interested in like just praying about it? Like, we just need more interpreters. Like, you can't really do a deaf ministry with less than 2. And so and she was the only one. So she's like, in order to start this, I need somebody. And so I was like, yeah, I'm going to start praying about it. And I reached out to the pastor and I was like, can I just come visit for the weekend? I know I've already visited the church, but I just want to come meet more people. And that was April of 2023. And my mom and I flew out, visited for the weekend. And my job had gone remote, so I could move. Like it was mobile. Yeah, it was so nice. And so I told the pastor, I was like, I kind of have everything I need, except I don't have anywhere to live. And I need a roommate, or like if somebody has a place I can stay until I find an apartment, something like that. And so he was like, yeah, we'll kind of like put feelers out in the church. Just continue to be praying about it. We'll see what the Lord does. And so I go home thinking like, maybe the end of the year, like maybe it'll be in a few months. We'll see what doors the Lord opens. I had no idea. Even leaving my trip, I was like, I don't even know what the Lord's going to do. And it was the next day that the church emailed me and was like, hey, there's a family that's going to let you stay in their spare bedroom for like the summer. So you'll have like 3 months to find an apartment. And they have like a couple of kids. Like it's a really sweet family. And I had prayed like the night before. I'm like, Lord, as soon as you provide a place to live, I'll move. Like just show me when and where. And so I get that email and I'm like, so now? In my mind, I'm thinking like August, and this was April. Dang. And so I was like, okay. And so I was kind of talking to like, my people, my family. And I was like, I don't know why I wouldn't, like, there's nothing that I'm like, well, let's wait till this, let's wait till that. I was kind of like, why wouldn't I go now? And so the next weekend that I would have had time to pack and get everything going was my birthday, which is Memorial Day weekend. So I had that Monday off. And so I moved 3 weeks later and drove from Tennessee to Texas on my birthday.
That is a crazy story.
That is wild.
Yeah.
Zach moved from Florida. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah.
You drove?
I did. Yeah, I moved from Orlando, Florida.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, I relate to your story a lot in a lot of ways. Yeah.
How long have you been here?
I've been in Texas now for...
Don't remind him.
Yeah, almost a decade.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
What?
Almost a decade, dude.
No way.
How crazy is that,
That's
bro?
insane.
Yeah.
Because it was 4 years at SAGU.
Yeah, because I moved here I graduated 2016 as well, high school.
No. Oh.
So then I moved to Texas, like near Dallas. Graduated college in 2020. That's 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
I've been here for 4 years, like over 4 years, dude. So like, I think it's been almost 9 years since I've been here.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's freaky, man.
Dude, it is freaky. Don't remind me, bro.
How many times did you say you've made the trip from here to Florida?
Like just driving, or talking about in general?
Just driving.
Just driving, probably like.
It's at least once a year, right? Or like twice a year. Probably.
I didn't drive at all last year, I don't think. So it's probably been. It's got to be in the teens.
Really?
Like, since there and back, yeah.
Dang.
Yeah.
So long. How long of a drive is that?
It's like 17 hours. I'm
it's
sure
it's the same to Tennessee.
Yeah, that's what I figured. Yeah, it's a drive, dude. The drive, like, gosh, that drive just sucks though, because it's literally like you get on I-20 and you're on that road for 1,000 miles.
Yeah.
And like,
well, even coming from Texas to Tennessee, you're going through like Arkansas, Memphis. It's like the driest, ugliest lands. And I'm like, gosh, you don't even get to a pretty part until you're basically in Nashville. And then it's like, well, now I have 2 hours. So.
Yeah. It's the same for me. Yeah. It's like Louisiana and Mississippi. It's like, you're not going to see anything special out there, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our last trip, basically like together as a group for Second Floor, was down to Florida, and we stayed with Zach's parents.
Yeah,
it took 9 guys.
Wow, that's crazy,
dude. I still will never forget like that week and coming upstairs. Like literally, we have like a big like upstairs living room, and the entire floor is just covered in like blankets and like pillows. That was so funny.
And we went. It was like so the time changes. Like it goes. You lose an hour anyway, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But then it was also like the actual time changed too.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Oh.
I remember that because
so it changed twice.
Yeah. So we lost 2 hours.
Oh,
and so it turned like a 22. Ours was like ended up being 20 hours.
Yeah, that drive was rough.
Oh,
it was
rough.
Yeah.
We stayed up the whole time too.
Yeah.
We were in Florida for what felt like forever with 10th Hour, because we would stop at different churches. And so we went through like Pensacola all the way down to Miami, and then we're making stops all the way down, and then all the way. And I mean, parts of Florida are great, and I visit. We would vacation to Florida sometimes, But that trip of making stops, and then you're like, sometimes you stay in Airbnb, but in Miami, we were in sleeping bags on the floor of a church, and I was like, get me out.
Dude,
this,
gosh,
like,
is that like during the summer?
Oh, yeah.
I bet that was rough. I bet that was rough.
It was so hot. And then we're like going up and down the beach, like evangelizing. And I'm like, just have a good attitude. Just have a good attitude. And I'm like,
that's tough.
Dude.
Yeah.
That's really, I mean, you had what, 5 months of that before you went off to Uganda?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So you spent 3 months in Africa?
Mm-hmm.
So what all states did you go to in like during those 5 months?
We obviously started in New Mexico, and we did a couple of stops in there. We were through Texas, because we did East Coast and then West Coast. So I forget kind of where the cutoff, like which ones we visited on the line, because I think we went to Texas on both tours. But East Coast, we were in Mississippi. We drove to Louisiana. I don't remember if we had a stop in Louisiana. Georgia. I don't even remember. We went along basically the coast, East Coast, and we would have several different stops. Alabama was one.
Was there a spot that was like your favorite?
Georgia. I love Georgia though. I do not like Alabama. I'm Tennessee though. Tennesseans and Alabamans, like, we don't. I'm like, I actually intentionally skipped that stop in Alabama because we were driving through it, and they were like, okay, we want to hit 2 different churches, so guys will, or whoever really wants to, will go to Mobile, Alabama, and the rest of you will go on to wherever the next stop was. And I was like, take me anywhere else. I do not want to be.
There is nothing in Mobile, Alabama, dude. Nothing.
No. So yeah, I loved, on the East Coast, I loved Georgia because it was just beautiful. And I had we flew out of Atlanta, and I had been to Georgia before, living, on that end. But the night before we left for Uganda was like the most memorable night of 10th Hour, I think, as a whole.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't actually want to go to Africa at all. I was this close to like dropping out before actually flying out, because I was like, Lord, I don't want to. I'm a little bit of a germaphobe. And
that makes a lot of sense.
Was real stressed about what I was gonna have to eat, and like what I was gonna what life was gonna be like.
Oh, dude, that's real.
That's real. Yeah. I'm not a germaphobe, and I was thinking about that.
I just did, and they don't show you pictures. They'll show you some pictures, but they don't want you to have a preconceived idea.
Yeah, definitely not.
And so the night before, we were at a church in Georgia, and I wasn't teaching this night either. And oh my gosh, it was so. During my trip, I had really been praying for members of my family, of just certain ones really having just a burden on my heart for them. And I go to this service, and our team is teaching, and then after the teaching ends, the pastor comes up and he's like, hey, I want everyone who's going to Africa to come to the altar, and we just want to pray over you. It was a pretty small church, so everybody just kind of laid hands on the team. There's 10 of us traveling. And I really didn't want to. It was like one of those nights where I'm like, I'm already struggling with having to fly out tomorrow, And so I go up to the front, and we all kneel down, and we're just praying. And this girl comes. I hadn't met anybody in the church. Normally we're like kind of, mingling, getting to know people in the church beforehand and after. But I hadn't talked to anybody. I kind of been off to the side, and I'm like praying and just like, Lord, just change. I don't even know what I was praying. I was just like, change my heart. And but my family had been on my heart really heavy that day, and I was praying for my family. And the girl behind me comes up, and she puts her hand on me, and she starts praying, and she's praying generally, like, pray for protection for this trip, and just that she would have safe travels. And then she like specifically starts praying, I pray for this girl's family. Like, there's somebody in her family that doesn't know you and is really struggling with believing in you, and I just pray that you touch that person, that you would open their eyes, and just praying so specifically for members of my family. And I like broke down, and I was like, oh my goodness, because my pastor was like a couple people over, and he could hear what was being said by this girl, and he was like, man, like, that's wild. And then a few minutes later, everybody's kind of like done praying. The pastor comes up, and he's like, it's just on my heart that we need to pray for our lost family and our people in our family that are not, saved. And he was like, so I just want people to start calling out names, and I just want to pray together over these members that don't know the Lord. And so we were collectively praying over it, and it was just like such a touching moment of like, I just felt like the Lord was reassuring me that he saw me and he heard my prayers, and he was pursuing the people that I was praying for him to pursue, you know?
Wow,
so, yeah.
Dang. So you kind of got confirmation that
it was, and I think that was my fear too of leaving. Like, what if something happens while I'm gone? You know, like with anybody in my family, and it was just like the Lord just being like, I've got it. Like I'm taking care of it, and so you can go. And so we flew out the next day, and I was like,
was that the first time you left like the country?
No, I had I actually visited a deaf village in Jamaica when I was in high school.
Oh, what?
That's cool.
But
a deaf village?
A deaf village.
Holy cow.
Mm-hmm. They have a whole deaf school in Kingston, Jamaica, and then up the mountain they have a deaf village.
What was that like?
It was so cool. It was early. I mean, I had been learning ASL, you know, in my childhood, but I wasn't like, I was still kind of getting my way through conversations. I wasn't super skilled or anything. So it was definitely a test of my, like, being able to understand what everybody's saying and respond and that kind of thing. But yeah.
That's right. Because, I mean, sign language is like a universal language. It doesn't matter.
It's not, though.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
That's what I've always been told.
I know. A lot of people think that. No, it's actually, it is kind of, I don't really fully understand how.
I'll never say that again.
Glad Loren can be here to set the record straight.
No, it's a fair thought, though, because a lot of people assume that. A lot of people assume that. It's not like a dumb
hilarious.
thought. But no, it really does depend on like the country and region and you know, that kind of thing. And so like in Jamaica, they still used American Sign Language. There were some differences, but so I was still able to, you know, communicate there. But like England, which is crazy to me because England speaks English.
Yeah.
Their sign language, I could not carry on a conversation with
Really?
someone.
What the heck?
It's wildly
That's
different.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's nuts.
So I guess then going to Africa, like, I mean, dude, going
3 months.
Yeah, 3 months is that's a commitment, dude.
Yeah.
That's a stay.
Yeah.
But you'd already been out of the country.
Shower like situation there.
Well, the first week we didn't have water. So we had they would bring us pails of water from the well, because they had a system where you would have a shower. I mean, shower's a really strong word, but it was basically a shower. And but the water pump or something had broken the day we arrived, and I was already praying my way through every single stop, you know, every interaction. And so we get there and they're like, okay, well, the water's out, but we're gonna bring pails of water for you guys. So you basically have these 2 things of water, and you use it to flush your toilet, and you use it to sponge bath, basically, if you, and for a week. That's all we had. And so I remember there's a water tower that you can climb up, and I mean, Uganda was gorgeous. I've never seen anything like Uganda. It was beautiful. And I grew to really love it. I really did. But in the first few weeks, I climbed to the top of the water tower, and I'm looking out at this gorgeous landscape. And I just literally start sobbing. And I'm like, God, I cannot get through 3 months of this. I haven't showered in 6 days. I haven't, there's no way I can do this. But I did, and the Lord got me through it.
Wow. What was it like coming back? I feel like once you face a challenge like that, especially one where you're so immersed, you come back and you're like, things that you used to think were difficult are not so difficult anymore.
Yeah, it was, well, I think my, my germaphobe self was dialed down a little bit. I'm it's rising again, I feel. But no, I think it really gave me perspective for what's important, which sounds so cliche, but over there, they're not worried about everyday, comforts. They're they're really big on education, and they're, they teach the word, and they have a chapel in the school that we were at. And so that was really our whole 3 months there. It was you learn how to teach the word, you learn how to share your faith, and you're tutoring kids and you're working one-on-one. It was all about relationships, and I had a really different experience in a way, because I guess 3 weeks into Uganda, there was a girl that came to the ministry, or I guess the project had grown so much. They had a medical center, and this young girl came to the medical center and was asking for an abortion, and they were like, we don't do that. She was already 7 months pregnant, And so they were, and in Uganda, I mean, one, abortions or any medical procedure is scary.
I mean, yeah.
And so they were basically like, if you will agree to keep the baby and we'll take care of you, we'll pay for like your food, we'll feed you, we'll give you a place to live. If you will keep your baby through term, we will take your baby. Whenever you deliver, we'll take care of it. We'll set it up for adoption. Wow. And we'll put you in school and we'll basically take care of you for the sake of this baby. And so they did that. And the baby was born the day that Roe v. Wade was overturned.
What?
Isn't that wild?
What?
That's nuts.
And so baby was born, and I mean, I have such a heart for babies. Like, I love kids and that. And my mom, it was so funny because I knew that this was happening. I knew the baby was going to be born, but I didn't know how much interaction we would have. And we had only been there a couple weeks, so like even the leaders didn't know us well. They weren't familiar with us. And so there was a nurse there that was like the primary caretaker of the baby, but she was working one-on-one with the mom, and like she was doing a lot in the medical center. She couldn't dedicate all day every day to a newborn. And so she pulled me aside and was like, I've just been praying that the Lord would show me, I need help with this baby and I need someone specific. And so she was like, I know I don't know you, but the Lord put you on my heart. Like, would you be willing to, I need like 4 days out of the week for you to take care of this baby. And it wouldn't be all day, but it would be like large portions of the day. And I was like, absolutely. Like, I mean, I grew up with, babies all around because I had so many siblings. And so I called my mom and I'm like, Mom, there's a newborn baby that I am like going to be able to take care of. And she was like, I have literally been praying that the Lord would bring you a baby because I know how like discouraged you are. And I know a baby would like encourage you and cheer you up. And so, and it gave me such, life in Uganda. There were times where it was so busy and they wanted our schedule to be as full as possible. Like, they want us doing things. And it was kind of overwhelming. Yeah. And I had kind of like not had as much time to really seek the Lord on my own and just pray. Like, I feel like I was just really overwhelmed with everything that was happening. And so this time with the newborn, I guess early on in her life, I couldn't leave the room with her. So I had to stay in this room, just me and her for like hours at a time. And it was just a time that I got to spend with the Lord. Like, I was able to pray over her and I was praying just, about everything going on. And it just grew my faith in that season of like, even in an area where I'm like, my flesh is struggling with things I do or don't want to do, like the Lord sees and the Lord is still going to use me, sometimes against my will, but he's also going to bring blessing in how he uses me too, and so,
wow.
Yeah, it was.
Wow.
That's so cool.
That is amazing. So fast forward to now, like present day, like what would you say is your experience with church compared to before?
I think
because you've been here for the past 3 years.
2 years. I'm coming up on 2 years in May. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Gotcha. Yeah, the people in the church that I'm at now are so different than the people that I grew up with, and I don't mean to throw shade on those people at all. Of
course,
but I think the Lord, if anything, has just taught me that I can't allow my opinion of some people be my opinion of him, and I can't think that the opinion of other people, like their opinion of me, is not his opinion of me. And so really separating, like, Lord, you've given us the church and we're called to serve and we're called to be a part of it, but we're all fallen and we're all human, and some churches just get it wrong and some people get it wrong.
Right.
And I think he's given me a lot of forgiveness toward that, and taking responsibility for my own actions at the same time, because we're also called to be diligent to seek out the word on our own. And if we disagree with something somebody's telling us, like, we're not meant to abandon everything we know just because it's different, but to really pursue truth and understand what he says about who we are in him. And I think that's solidified my faith a lot of like, I'm still going to meet people who I differ and I disagree with, or, whatever, but I can't let that dictate my walk with the Lord or my relationship, or even being hurt or offended or, whatever. That can't dictate my walk with the Lord,
Yeah.
So this is kind of like out of left field, but I'm just curious, like, what did your family think when you got tattoos?
Well, thankfully,
I was wondering the same thing, actually.
Thankfully, I was the third. So my older two sisters both got tattoos.
Okay.
Yeah. And they had a harder time than I did. And my oldest sister, she got all scripture. So it was kind of like,
it's a gateway.
You know, originally, like, my parents were like, if you do it, you can't do it while you live with us. If you're going to do it, you have to do it after you move out. But my sister had gone to college, which didn't mean she had technically moved out because she moved back in. And so it was like she got a tattoo while she was in college, but then she moved back in. And then they're like, you're living under our roof with a tattoo and like that kind of thing. And so they had a harder time with my oldest sister. And then my second sister, because again, it was like scripture. So they were kind of like, you know, whatever. But my second sister, she got the signature of J.R.R. Tolkien, the guy who wrote,
Dude, that is sick. Oh my gosh.
On her arm, and she has some of the coolest tattoos. Like
thing.
Oh yeah, for sure, definitely.
You could ever do.
It's funny though because she got that years later. My brother is like 6 years younger than me. When he turned 18, he got the same exact tattoo. I actually don't remember where it is, but he got the same exact tattoo. And then he got, I'm probably going to get it wrong, but I think it's Frodo's sword. No, it's not Frodo's sword. It's the broken one.
Oh,
you know what I'm talking about?
Dude.
Is it Aragorn's? Okay.
Yeah,
he's going to hear me and be like, Frodo. But he got that sword. So a lot of Lord of the Rings. My sister has the whole, the snowy forest scene from Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, like the lampposts.
Oh yeah.
And she's got that whole thing.
Wait. Back up.
Dude.
She's got a sleeve of the Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe winter scene with J.R.R. Tolkien's signature.
Yeah.
That's
crazy.
insane.
That is crazy.
Yeah, she has a really cool tattoo. So, but when she got that one, my grandparents had a really hard time with that one. And to this day, my grandparents don't like tattoos. And I mean, that's,
mine the same way.
Yeah, I think all grandparents are like that.
Back in their day, having a tattoo meant you were like either came
signing
from prison
yourself away.
or like in a gang. Those were like the only two options.
Yeah. So it was, by the time I got mine, because I didn't even get my first one, I don't know, I guess I was 18 or 19. But at that point, they had had tattoos for like 3 years. And so it was kind of like, another way. I do remember though, my mom, because I got one with my sister, and then I had just 2 for like 3 years or something. And then I got like 4 more like in the span of 2 months or something like that. Like I was like, I got back from 10th hour and was like, that's it. I'm getting like all of them. And I remember my mom, I came over and I wasn't showing them, like, because some of them are small. And I remember her noticing, like she noticed my arm. She goes, another one. I was like, it's cute. And she was like, just don't show me.
That's so funny.
Gosh.
Okay, that was a quick aside. So you've been at this church for almost 2 years, maybe 2 years in May. You've been volunteering as an interpreter, right? But like, so what do you do during the day? Like, what's your day job?
So I still work for a hospital in Tennessee. So I do like paperwork basically for primary care doctors and specialists.
Nice.
So I have it's 40 hours a week. I just do that in the morning. I work till 3. And then my like evenings are all kind of different because I'm kind of involved in 3 different ministries right now. So I'm doing, like, they just started a young adults group. And so I'm a part of the young adults group, and I'm attending for myself, but then I'm really close with the pastor and his wife. So I'm kind of like helping, that. So I'm like trying to be consistent there. And then I'm a youth leader. So I do that on Sunday nights. And then our deaf ministry has a deaf Bible study on Wednesdays. And so I do that on Wednesdays. And then I have a roommate, and she and I hang out on other days, and that kind of thing. So I just
sounds like a great life.
It does.
It's been going great. Yeah.
That is awesome. Yeah, I saw your nice Honda that you drove up in.
Oh my goodness, that's brand new and a gift from God.
New.
Like I drove here, to Texas with a 2007 Honda CR-V that was on its last leg. I don't even honestly know how I got here. Not only did I get here, but I made it an extra year driving that thing around Texas.
Really?
Every summer it would overheat, and I'm trying to add coolant and keep it down. But I could not afford a car, to get a new car at all. And I was praying about it, and my car was breaking down every other week. And I had to either borrow somebody else's car or whatever.
That is the worst, dude.
And I was praying about it, and the Lord honestly just opened up another avenue for me to get some extra income, and it was like exactly what I needed for a car payment. And so it was like,
wow.
praise Jesus.
There you go.
Doesn't get better than that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
How does it feel to drive something that's reliable?
Oh my gosh. I genuinely don't know if I ever really have. This is like the newest car I've ever, I mean, obviously the newest, but like I've never owned anything newer than a 2007.
Yeah.
So every other car I've had, I'm like fixing it every so often. And this one, I'm like, if anything goes wrong with it, I will actually lose my brain. Like I can't, there's been like moments and nothing's wrong with it, but I'll like trick myself into thinking like, was that a weird sound? Is it doing something?
Dude,
and I'm like, if something happened to a brand new car, I think I would just go to horseback at that point. Like I don't know.
You know what's so funny? I just realized this. I have been going actually backwards in the years of cars that I've owned, because my first, the Honda that my parents got me was a 2004, like Honda Accord.
Yeah.
And then I started a fence company, and I got a 2003 Ram truck. Then
that truck was ginormous.
Really?
Yeah.
It's massive, yeah. And so then sold that, still had my Honda for a long time, and then last year bought our neighbor's car for $1,000. That was a 2001 Toyota RAV4, which is like really similar to the CRV.
Yeah.
And got in an accident. Someone ran a red light, and that right after I put a brand new transmission in it, so that was really fun.
Oh, that's the worst. You know, I had a car. I've been through a few, and everybody wants to blame it on me being a bad driver, but I reject that wholeheartedly because I've been hit twice, I guess technically.
Okay.
And after my Malibu, I bought a Pontiac like G5 little car, and it wasn't expensive, but I had like, my dad had taken a little bit of a loan out on it, and then I was like paying my dad back. And but I was still making payments to the bank, so I don't even know. I was on my way to make my last payment, pay off this car. And this, I think it was a 4Runner or something, it was like a bigger SUV, ran into me on like a freeway, and then I run into another big SUV, and then another big SUV hits the SUV behind that had hit me.
Gosh.
So I like am really, I'm this tiny car, it's a 2-door, like little thing, gets pushed underneath this 4Runner, and I'm literally like, I was on my way to being done.
Of course.
And I was like 18, and the guy in front of me like gets out. He honestly thought I was like gonna be crippled or something, because my car was like, you know, and I got out and I was like, well, there goes that, you know. I'm like, oh man, it was terrible.
Yeah, we've had our fair share this year, Zach and I. But now I drive a 98, so I've like progressively gone backwards.
Wow.
Yeah.
Dude, yours is a 98? Mine's a 98 too, dude. Look at that.
Nice.
Look at that.
They're freaking brothers out. Okay, so I'm really curious. What has been your experience? So you dated that one dude, right? Like back in Chick-fil-A days.
Mm-hmm.
And so you went on this whole 10-hour thing, and then you've been at this church for a while. You've been sort of in the Austin area for a while.
Mm-hmm.
What has been like your experience in terms of like, I guess sort of the dating pool? Because we had a girl on, I was telling you about Carly.
Yeah.
We just had her on a few episodes ago for the second time. And so her first episode, we talked about this for like 3 hours straight.
Oh,
she was like super, it was a great conversation.
Yeah,
I really enjoyed it a lot. But from your perspective, like what has it been like?
Like in Texas specifically?
Well, okay. So to give you context to that, basically, I'm curious as to what's the selection like right now that you see, and like some of your frustrations, and then also, I guess like, did you have any serious relationships leading up to that point? Like, what was that like?
Yeah. So, well, I guess to start with, leading up to, I was in a relationship it was kind of like a complicated on and off, but we were really close and basically together for going on 6 years. It was like, wow. It was a very complicated situation. So I hesitate to say 6 years because we were technically together for a year-ish.
Yeah.
But then we were just best friends. And when you've dated and then you try to go back to being best friends, you're never just best friends for the rest of that time.
It's weird.
But we actually broke up when I moved here, a couple of months after I moved here. And so that was a tough situation, but it was genuinely like, I have so much respect for him. Like, he's genuinely such a good guy, but our lives were just going two very different directions. And so the Lord and he's a believer, and the Lord just kind of made it clear of like, you're not going the same path. I'm not taking you the same way. And so the first relationship with the guy from Chick-fil-A was like almost 3 years. And then this one was pretty long. And so after that, I dated, I went out with a couple of people. I was never like in another committed relationship after those two. And then in Texas, I laugh because everyone in my life right now is like on a mission to set me up with somebody.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So
like
annoying?
I love them for it. Like I appreciate their heart so much, and they're so sweet. But it's also like,
sometimes you just you need to be single.
Yeah, and I had to remind people of that too, especially when I first moved here, because I'm like, technically people were trying to set me up, and I'm like, I broke up with him. We broke up like 4 months ago. Like that was, now it's been a year and a half, but like, I'm like, just give me some time. Like, I need to, I also, because of how long those relationships were, I had never really been single, like on my own, like, just kind of doing life by myself. And I almost think I needed that. I think the Lord really used these past like 2 years of being here and has really taught me a lot through. And it's been hard because when you are so used to having somebody in your corner of like, this is my person, and then not having that was really, and has been hard, but it's also been super sweet and fulfilling to like really switch to, okay, Lord, I need you to fulfill me. And if I'm not fulfilled by you, I'm never going to be fulfilled by anybody else. You know what I mean?
So
and
good.
so that's really been the last 2 years. But I have like, there have been a couple of times people have been like, go on a date with this guy, or like, at least meet him, or, whatever. Somebody invited somebody to my church to meet me, and then I was like,
oh no.
So, and it was all such good intentions, and it's funny now. It genuinely is funny. But yeah, from what I can see, it's like I haven't met a lot of young adults in the Austin area, to be fair. So like, the options I see are from a very small pool. And I think it's hard too, because I feel like in your 20s, like I said, like everybody is in such a different season. And I feel like in your 20s, you either have like figured out what you believe and you're pursuing that, or you're still trying to figure it out.
That's a good point.
In at least from my perspective, and I don't mean this like pridefully, but I know who I am in the Lord, and I know my relationship with the Lord, and I don't really want to be partnered with somebody who isn't sure yet. You know what I mean? And if and they could get there, and that's great, and their walk is their walk, and I don't, but
that doesn't mean that you have to
it's like right now I'm so content to wait for the Lord to bring me somebody who is like so sure of who they are in the Lord and is ready to pursue him more than they pursue me,
My wife went through like a really similar thing, like as season of singleness, I guess we would call it. Before I met her, and it was I joke with her because I'm like, I would never have dated you in like high school. I would not have, like, it would have been totally different. But because she was so intentional with this certain time while she was in community college before she came to SAGU, God was able to like exponentially grow her in ways that when we met made us really compatible in a place where we were both healthy enough to start dating. And if she didn't have to take that time, and if she didn't take that time, she probably wouldn't have been at that place. And it's so funny to me that people, and you can weigh on this too, but it's so funny how people are like, in one breath they'll be like, yeah, just really make sure you're healthy, and then also my brother really likes you, can I set you up with him? And you're like,
it's crazy.
What are you talking about?
I've had people approach me who I've never had a conversation with, but just know me because of and I understand it, because with what I do at the church, I am up front. People know my face, but they don't know me necessarily. And I've had people who I'm like, remind me your name, like, who are you? And she's like, I have a friend that would be perfect for you. And I'm like, I don't really know you. Like, I don't know.
There's a lady at our church that tried to set my wife up with someone because she didn't realize she was married.
Oh my
And
God.
never saw me. Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Okay.
And my mom was like,
I don't really like understand the like drive for people to like want to set other people up.
I think
like, what is that?
It's genuinely like an excitement thing. Like they just want to be a matchmaker, or they just think that they're gonna like they know.
And I think part of it too is, especially, I don't really understand it when you're approaching somebody that you don't know, but I understand it when it's somebody who, like, I have people in my life who I know love and care for me so much, and their heart is like, they have a great marriage, and they're like, I want this for you because I love you that much. And I am so lucky because I am surrounded, the people that the Lord has brought around me are solid marriages for me to look to. And
awesome.
I'm so thankful for that. But I have to remind them sometimes, like, it's okay that I'm in this season. And I'm really like thankful for this season, because the thing is too, is like when this season ends, like you're never going to get that season back. And perfectly, you know, and
hopefully.
I like that's, I think, important. I think that's been my prayer too, of like, of course I have moments where I'm like, could this season end? Like, could we move on? But the Lord has reminded me so many times to be intentional with the season, because it's like, he's like, this is my time with you where you don't have any distractions. And not only that, the ministry that he has me in, I don't think he wants me to be distracted from it until he does bring somebody into my life. Like, and that's been my prayer too, of like, Lord, I don't even want to be like swayed. Like, I don't even want to be distracted by something that's temporary, unless it is somebody that you're bringing in to do ministry with me, or to be, you know, a partner, not somebody who's fleeting, you know?
100%.
Yeah.
Because the reality is when you get married or in a serious relationship, your attention is split. Your energy's split. That's just how it is. When you have kids, it's split again. Like, there's a reason why your parents couldn't give you that much attention. It's because their attention was split 9 different ways on top of their jobs.
Yeah.
And that's just the reality. And so it's so funny to me that, like, in one breath, some pastors or church leaders or church members will be like, yeah, you know, singleness is so good. Like, Paul was single, and we just don't have enough people that are single. And it's like, well, you know, why aren't you married yet?
Yeah.
And you're like,
I know.
What?
I know.
Like,
there is a lot of pressure.
There's like a pressure to be married as if it's like somehow holier than like you're missing out. When biblically, that's not the case. We really don't see that that's true. It's, you can actually serve God in a deeper way and in another bucket when you're single versus there's another way when you're married to serve God, and both are great. And it's just funny to me that we have this sort of catch-22 thing sometimes going on.
Yeah, it is. It is so. But it is funny. I do laugh about it sometimes, because I'm like, a lot of them, at least that I know in my life, you know, it's been a while since they dated, and or like they met their significant other when they were kids, and it's been the only person they've, you know, really dated, and that's just been, you know, the love of their life. And I am so thankful for people that have that. But it's like, this is also a different, you know, time, a different generation. It's also different to be dating, you know, in your 20s, in your late 20s. Like, that's a whole different world. And so I think it's just different perspectives.
Okay, so you mentioned that, like, definitely don't want to date someone who is not like 100% all in on their faith and also into ministry too. But like, apart from that, is there anything that you've been frustrated about in terms of maybe like qualities that you're seeing in the pool of people, or like,
I don't know. It's hard to say here because I haven't met a ton of like single young adults. You know what I mean? Like, I think a majority of my church is married with families. And so we just started a young adults group, and we've only had like 2 meetings. And so I've just started meeting a few people. But I don't really see a common thing. And this is still, you know, I guess related to like faith, but I feel like if anything, it's just a lack of confidence. I feel like, I mean, coming from a female's perspective, looking at men, I feel like you can go one of 2 ways, where you're not confident at all and you're not sure of yourself, or you could be too far the other way, where you're overly confident, you're cocky, you're kind of like, it's
Too much.
Yeah, it's too much.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's hard to find somebody who's in the middle, where it's like you have a humility, but you're also sure of who you are and I think that goes back to knowing who you are in the Lord and your identity
for sure.
in that. Because I think the pride and the cockiness comes from finding your identity in other things and like more worldly things versus your identity in Christ. But
yeah, no, and the reason I was asking you that is because Carly was kind of mentioning more that there was just like a lack of intentionality with a lot of people that she noticed, a lot of like males specifically.
Yeah.
And that, you know, she was dating them or maybe she was interested in them and was like, okay, like, am I going on 6 dates with you and then I don't even know if I'm going to be your girlfriend or not?
Yeah.
Like there's almost like this hesitancy to commit. That's
100%.
like very prevalent in especially the male generation.
Yeah.
Our generation.
I've definitely seen that as well. Like as you say that, I'm like, oh, that is so true, because my roommate and I have had a lot of conversations about that, of just it is almost like, I don't know if it's a fear of commitment or again maybe it's like a lack of I see it maybe as like a lack of confidence of like, if you're interested, say you're interested. You know what I mean? Or if you are wanting to pursue, make that known, and then give the female the choice of okay, I want to be pursued by you or I don't want to be pursued by you. And then I think it probably is that like fear of rejection too. I mean, we all have a fear of rejection. Nobody wants it. But I think in society today, there has been such a twist on like male and female like gender roles to where people are confused of who's supposed to be doing the pursuing and who's, you know, submitting. And I think it's gotten its way into the church somehow where men are they're not sure if women want to be pursued almost. I think it's almost like, do you want me to ask you out? Do you want me to, you know, do that kind of thing? Or are you wanting to be the one? And I've talked to some people who are like, oh, I think I like when the girl initiates. I'm like, well, I hope you find someone. Like that's just, to me, I'm like, I think the Lord has given us such specific roles, and I think when we are wanting to be who He's created us to be, we're going to file into one of those roles. And I mean, that's going to look differently. I mean, obviously, it doesn't have to be cookie cutter in, you know, a box, but I think He's made men to be the pursuer, and He's made women to be the more submissive, like follower. And I don't know. I think deep down, everybody wants to be that role. You know what I mean? I think that we all have a leaning that way.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
No, that's a great answer.
Yeah.
I think that it's really tough on the male side, at least from what I've noticed from people and from my friends, is like, you know, we're kind of in this society that's like really against masculinity. And so not only I think do some guys face the potential rejection, which in general is a lot to face, right? Like to even go up to someone and say, hey, like, can I get your number or whatever is like a lot to do in the first place.
Yeah.
But then to also not even know if that person, if you do show up in healthy masculinity, will respect you. That's like a whole nother level that for a long time I don't think men have ever had to deal with. It's always been like, well, if I, you know, have all these things lined up, then I'm gonna find a wife. Yeah. And yeah, I'm gonna have to pursue her. Okay, but she wants to be pursued. Now it's like, do people even want to be pursued? Who am I even supposed to be?
All the lines have been blurred.
It's really tough, and I agree with you. I think it has really made its way into the church. And kind of another reason I was asking that question is because I have seen a trend where, especially like single women will kind of complain of like, and they have a lot of reason to complain of, where people will just be like, well, he's a good Christian guy. And they're like, okay, but like, he doesn't have a job, you know, or something like that. Or like, he doesn't have any skills, or he doesn't have any drive or ambition or a career or business or whatever. But people are just like, well, you know, he loves God. Like, you should just date him. And it's like, no, you shouldn't.
Again, I think like the Lord has given us, I think there is this idea that, well, if I'm loving the Lord and I'm pursuing the Lord, then He's going to bring whatever He, you know, wants for me along the way. But it's like, yes, He does bring blessing, but we also have a responsibility to be faithful to what He's calling us to. And I don't think sitting at home not doing anything is being faithful to what he could have for you. And like I said, I think he made the men to be not only the pursuer but the protector, the provider. And if they're not going out seeking to be the protector and the provider, how are they going to expect a female who's inclined to be submissive and a helpmate and a support? What are they supporting? You know what I mean? Like they need you to be strong in your role so that they can be strong in their role. And I think obviously there's that whole idea of toxic masculinity, but I think when someone who does have a relationship with the Lord is masculine, it gives the female freedom to be feminine. Because what I've found being, even if I've been in relationships, I've lived on my own since I was 18, and I've never lived with a partner or anything like that. And so I think being single in my 20s, it's forced me to be an independent, like do for myself. I make my, I support myself, I work. And not that is a masculine trait, but it's like something, it's the world. It's like what I've had to do. And I think naturally, that's not really what women were created to do. Like we weren't created to be the one that provides for everything and takes care of, that side of, my roommate and I joke because we're like, we were not made to work. But it's a joke. But again, when he brings your other half, who is that masculine side, who is the one that wants to be the protector and the provider, then you can be free to be more feminine and fall into that role of being a support and a helpmate and taking, and I feel like that's this idea of taking care of the home. Society is like bashing on, and it's but I'm like, and again, not everybody wants that. My sister loves working, and that is her joy. I'm not saying that everybody has to be a caretaker and a home, be a stay-at-home mom.
And I think that's what people think when they hear you say that. They think that you're saying that every woman should do that, and you're not saying that.
No, I think it gives people the freedom to be that if they want. And I think that we all have an inclination to be one way or the other. And so there are some people that pursue a career and they love it and that's their life. And that is what the Lord has for them. He doesn't call everyone to be a homemaker and have kids. And that's just the honest truth. And I think some believers would even fight that, idea that every woman needs to have children. If you're not having children, you're doing something wrong. And I don't believe that's the case. I just think that right now there's a war against masculinity, but also against females who want to be feminine and who want to be that helpmate. And it's almost like this battle to be the other. And again, I feel like I'm repeating myself, but if you're a female who tends to be more masculine or tends to like different things, like that doesn't make you wrong or sinful or vice versa. It just means, it's just giving you the freedom to like fill the role that God called you to.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's actually really refreshing to hear you say that. I think it's really rare to hear someone honestly have someone stand for a view like that, especially in Austin. So it's just really refreshing to hear another young person say that, because I agree with you.
Absolutely, yeah. I would even say like you saying how like a person, like a guy, male, whatever, being masculine that allows a woman to be more feminine. I think a woman then taking on that supportive role in turn just feeds the masculinity of the man. Yeah. And it's just so true. That's just how it works. That's how that like bond solidifies.
I mean, my wife has told me so many times where she's just like, thank you for being you, because it allows me to relax and like be myself. And like she's working right now, but she wants to be able to stay home, and it's like I want to be able to support that for her and provide that for her. And she's very smart. She has a degree, like she has a work experience. And I think that's amazing. And I think she's going to continue to work towards a lot of things as well after having kids. And she's just really expressed how she's tried. She's done the things that she wants to do, and now she wants to be a mom. She wants to be a homemaker and a caretaker. And I can see it. Like I can see it in her nature coming out and wanting to be like, she has such a strength for that almost is not utilized in a work environment all the time. So it's interesting to hear you say that. So what, as we're kind of wrapping up here, what's like, obviously we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but like, what's your dream? What's your goal? What's your plan for, the next 5 to 10 years? Where would you love to see Loren at?
Man,
that's
honestly,
a big question.
It is a big question. I feel like because the last few years have been such a whirlwind of like, okay, Lord, wherever you're taking me, I want to keep that mindset of, Lord, if you have me in Texas for 10 more years, I want to be content and faithful in where you have me. But if you move me tomorrow, I want to be willing and obedient to do that. But I think, I definitely have a dream to be a mom. Like that has always been my heart. And so when it's the Lord's timing for that, that's my heart's desire for sure, to have a family.
You
but
thinking like 20 and counting? Or are you thinking
no.
like 10,
no.
5,
I think
1?
like a couple of few is like good enough. And I'm not obviously putting a timeline on that because who knows, what the Lord has.
Right, of course.
I love the ministry that I'm in. I love deaf ministry. So I definitely want to continue pursuing that and see where the Lord takes that even. Because even our deaf ministry, we started with one deaf, actually we started with no deaf people. It was just us interpreting to each other.
Oh, really?
Yeah, just to kind of get us like our practice going. And so that was almost 2 years ago. And now we have like 10, maybe 15 on a really good day, but 10 like that are coming pretty consistently. And for deaf ministry, that's huge.
A lot.
Yeah. And so I'm excited to see what the Lord does with that and with the church. And so I don't really have like a 5-year plan. I'm more just,
or just like, you have a desire to have to have a family.
Yeah,
that's
definitely.
amazing.
Whenever the Lord brings that in, I'll be ready and welcoming.
Awesome.
Heck yeah.
Okay, I have one more question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Zach may have more, but I have one more. If you could tell your 16-year-old self, if you could tell 16-year-old Loren a few things, what would they be? It doesn't have to necessarily be one thing, but like, what would you, with all the hindsight that you have now, what would be the advice that you gave your younger self?
That actually would have been my question like 15 minutes ago. So
Dude, really?
There we go. Yeah.
We're linked up right now.
Man, that is a really good question. There are several things I think I've thought of. And it's a deep question because I remember, me at 16. I think one thing I would say is to not give up on the people that have poured into you. I think I grouped everyone that was associated with that church all in one lump, my parents included. And I think I disregarded a lot of really great, faithful people who were pouring into me, and I cast them all aside and stopped listening, and I stopped desiring a relationship with them because of what a select few had done to me, and it wasn't even them. I couldn't take my anger out on the few people that had hurt me, and so I took it out on the people that were closest to me. And so I think one thing I would say is like redirect that anger to somebody else, or to something else, because I wounded a lot of people, and I think that is probably one of my biggest regrets looking back, is just my family and my closest friends took a big hit those years from me.
Gosh, that's a great that is a really great like revelation from that time. So I know you listened to Robert's podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Did you feel any like correlation to his story at all?
To a degree, I think it was different in a lot of ways, at least from my experience. Because I may be remembering wrong, but did he ever like walk away from, or was he pretty faithful?
He didn't never like renounce his faith. But yeah, he like took a break from church.
Okay, yeah. And struggle. And I do really, because it was a lot about being burnt out and struggling with continuing ministry and that kind of thing. I think it was different for me at the time because it was less about ministry and more about, I guess I do relate on the feeling of being manipulated and taken advantage of, maybe in different ways. I don't think my service, I don't feel like I was doing anything for the church. It wasn't in that sense being taken advantage of, but I think don't know. I think looking back, the biggest thing I remember feeling is just feeling lied to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I assumed everyone was lying. And I think looking back, I see it wasn't everyone. And there are great people that came out of that church, and my parents included, you know, but I definitely just assumed, because I saw hypocrisy and these things in certain people, I just assumed it was the whole church. And again, I did see faults that were faults in the church as a whole, not just individuals. There was like, you know, theology and looking back, things that were not handled properly by the church itself. But I think my hurt was more from individuals within the church. And that was more I took out on a lot of people.
Yeah. That's good stuff.
Well said. Got a lot of wisdom. You can tell.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. God's really blessed you with a lot of wisdom beyond your years.
Thank
For
you.
sure. Seriously. So thank you for sharing. Thank you for being so open and honest to people that you don't even really know. I really appreciate that. Seriously. These are some of my favorite podcasts, when we just meet a person and we get to like get to know them.
Yeah.
You know, on air or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I think your story will speak to so many people.
Yeah.
So many people, dude.
That's my prayer, because I think even talking to the high schoolers at our church last night, the Lord was just revealing that I think when you're going through something, the enemy convinces you that you're the only one that has ever been treated this way, been. And I think what I experienced in church can relate to other high school people who are that age now. And then, you know, what I've gone through in, you know, my later teens and 20s, I pray like will relate to other people who are maybe experiencing that too, or, you know, are in relationships they need to get out of, or, you know, things like that, where it's like, I don't know. I just pray the Lord uses it in a way that frees people.
Yeah,
know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because when you're in a situation like that, it is so easy to just take, especially when you're at that age, it's so easy just to take out your anger on everyone that you think is affiliated. But I think it's good to remind, I mean, even myself and believers, that like it's okay to take out that anger on God if you have to. Like, I know a lot of times growing up, I felt like afraid that, like, you know, it's sometimes, I mean, there are so many examples of the Bible where, you know, the people that God was leading, you know, important figures that were genuinely upset with God. Like, God, I would like, why did you even have me like born? Right? Like, they were just genuinely upset. And I feel like a lot of times we are just kind of afraid to express that kind of feeling towards God because it feels wrong. But I don't think God is really afraid of that. You know, I think he can take that, and that's the whole thing of like wrestling with him and wrestling with your faith. And he'll bring you through it. Yeah. So.
And I think just that he wants that open communication.
Exactly.
I think that and my tendency is, if I'm angry, if I'm frustrated, I'm like, well, I just won't talk about it. Let the other person cool off. I'll cool off. Yeah. Where, you know, the Lord he doesn't have our human heart. You know, it's not that he doesn't see us the way we see each other. And I think he wants, again, like you said, for us, like, Lord, I am so confused. I don't understand why this is happening. Yeah. And I think there obviously is a reverence that we have to have before the Lord.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I think he's like, just talk to me. Like, I already know what you're thinking, but I want you to share that. And I think that's been something that he's really been teaching me to exercise when I'm, you know, overthinking or dealing. I'll just, because I'm a big journaler, and for a long time I would just journal my thoughts. Like, I would just write everything down. And there was a switch, like, I mean, I have journals from like I was 9 years old all the way like through, basically. And so I would like journal, and then there was a change at some point where I'm like, the Lord's like, talk to me. You're talking to air. Like, you're talking to yourself and just like, you know, talking about yourself. It's like, change that direction to me and let me know how you're feeling. And so all of that just kind of was redirected. But
wow.
Gosh, yeah.
Do you have anything else? You good?
I don't think so. Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for coming on. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you everyone for listening to another episode of Second Floor Experience. And if you related to Loren's story, feel free to write in. We'll have our email. And just let us know what you think. Hope you have a great day, and we will catch you on the next episode of Second Floor Experience. Peace.
I want to talk to you. Not now. Later. No, now.